Good morning, Jefferson Jets. It is Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. It is an F day and day 86. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence, and your Jefferson Jets pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Jefferson Jets pledge. Jefferson Jets are respectful, safe, and kind. It is the Jefferson way to be our best every day. Our quote today is still from the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "The time is always right to do what is right." And now, a quick recap of what we had learned yesterday. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929. He worked very hard in school and skipped the 9th and 12th grades. After high school, he became a minister, met Coretta Scott, and moved to Alabama. And then yesterday, we started to learn how Dr. King was helpful and an activist during the Montgomery bus boycott. A boycott means to stop using a service or a good. And this particular bus boycott was started by Rosa Parks, another American hero. And now, enjoy the rest.
In the wake of the boycott victory, civil rights leaders recognized the need for a national organization to better coordinate their efforts. In January of 1957, Martin and roughly 60 other ministers and activists founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC. With Martin as president, the SCLC helped conduct nonviolent protests and demonstrations across the South to promote civil rights reform. A primary focus for the organization was registering African Americans to vote. The SCLC sponsored mass meetings in key Southern cities for that purpose. In 1963, Martin led a coalition of several civil rights groups in a nonviolent campaign aimed at Birmingham, Alabama, which was at that time described as the most segregated city in America. The nation was shocked to see images of young African Americans attacked by police dogs and high-pressure fire hoses displayed on television, newspapers, and magazines. It was during this campaign that Martin wrote his now famous Letter from a Birmingham Jail after being arrested again for his participation in the demonstrations. Later in 1963, Martin was one of the driving forces behind the March for Jobs and Freedom, more commonly known as the March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, over 250,000 people of all ethnicities gathered at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. to demand justice and equality for all people. It was here that Martin made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Delivered from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, this speech inspired the nation and is now considered one of the greatest in American history. Martin was later named Time Magazine's Man of the Year. This further cemented his status as the nation's foremost social change leader. In 1964, at 35 years old, Martin became the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize. When he found out that he had been selected, he promised to donate the prize money, over $54,000, to help continue the important work of the civil rights movement. He delivered another powerful speech when he accepted his award that was both moving and motivational. Also in 1964, partly due to the March on Washington and Martin's speech, Congress passed the landmark Civil Rights Act. This legislation made it illegal to discriminate against people because of their race. The Jim Crow rules of the South that promoted segregation and the harsh mistreatment of African Americans were now against federal law. This was one of the greatest accomplishments for the civil rights movement. In March of 1965, Martin led a march from Selma to the Capitol building in Montgomery, Alabama, to urge President Lyndon B. Johnson and his administration to pass a law protecting the rights of African American voters. At the conclusion of the march, Martin gave another powerful speech that helped rally more supporters. That same year, Congress went on to pass the Voting Rights Act that eliminated the remaining barriers to voting for African Americans. Prior to this legislation, there were still areas in which African Americans were completely disenfranchised, meaning they did not have the right to vote. Over the next 3 years, Martin's focus shifted from racial discrimination to economic injustice and international peace. He led campaigns in Chicago, Illinois, and spoke strongly against the Vietnam War. Martin's opposition to the war cost him support among white allies, including the president, union leaders, and publishers. Martin and the SCLC also organized the Poor People's Campaign in 1968 in an effort to assemble a multiracial coalition of poor Americans who would advocate for economic change. On April 4, 1968, Martin was shot while standing on the balcony outside of his hotel room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. At 7:05 p.m., Martin was pronounced dead at St. Joseph's Hospital. He was 39 years old. Martin was buried in his hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. changed the course of American history. He worked tirelessly to ensure that all people, regardless of race, religion, or national origin, had equal opportunities and could live their lives without fear of violence and discrimination. Martin is regarded as America's greatest human rights advocate. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill creating a federal holiday honoring Martin. The holiday, observed on the third Monday of January each year, is called Martin Luther King Jr. Day, or MLK Day. In the year 2000, it was officially observed by all 50 states for the first time.
All right, we don't have any birthdays here at Jefferson today, but it is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. He would have been 90 today. And again, we get to have no school on Monday, this upcoming Monday. What it ends up being is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So as we don't have school, I want you to think, what could you do in Dr. King's honor? And what are you going to do to be kind and respectful to the people that you are around? That would be a tremendous way to celebrate his history and what we can do to really celebrate him. We'll continue all week to bring you things about Dr. King and what we can do to honor his legacy. And then that is all we have today. Be great today, Jefferson Jets, and have a tremendous Tuesday.